I spent the rest of the afternoon locked in my room trying to concentrate on my homework, but my mind kept drifting. Each time I thought about Vanessa, about the way she was being groomed for this perfect life, this life that I was being shut out of, it only fueled the fire burning inside me. I couldn't sit still, couldn't stop thinking about. I stood there, frozen, feeling the weight of my mother's words like a physical blow. Vanessa is the pretty one, sweetheart. You have other qualities. You should understand the difference by now. The sting of her voice cut deeper than any insult ever could. She didn't even look at me as she said it, her attention focused on the glittering catalog she was flipping through for Vanessa's debutante ball. My twin sister, always the golden child, the one with the perfect smile, the one everyone noticed. And I was the afterthought, the one who existed to hold things together when everything fell apart, the one who never quite seemed to fit into their perfect world. I could hear Vanessa giggling behind me, already lost in her world of silk gowns and elegant shoes. I clenched my fists at my sides, trying to stop the tremor that was threatening to break through. I had been standing there, waiting for just a shred of acknowledgement, just one word of validation from my parents, and yet all I got was silence. They had already decided I wasn't worth investing in the way Vanessa was. I swallowed hard, fighting the tears that had started to burn my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me weak, of watching me crumble under their dismissiveness. But God, how much longer could I keep pretending it didn't hurt? I glanced at my father, sitting in his chair with his nose buried in the newspaper, oblivious to everything around him. He didn't even look up when he spoke. We're doing this for Vanessa's future. You'll understand when you're older. You'll get your chance, but not right now. Her debut is important. Important. The word echoed in my mind like a cruel joke. Important for what? A lifetime of people seeing her as nothing more than a commodity to be traded? To be married off to the highest bidder, to be admired for the wrong reasons, to be measured by nothing but how good she looked in a dress? I wasn't stupid. I understood the rules of their game. They didn't want me to be part of it. My sister had beauty. I had nothing but my grades, and those didn't seem to matter. I turned and walked out of the room, my heart pounding so hard in my chest that I could almost hear it over the hum of the house. I had to get out, to breathe, to think, to escape the suffocating reality of my place in this family. But the house felt too small, the walls pressing in, as though they were built just to remind me of my insignificance. I went straight to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection, but the girl staring back at me seemed like a stranger. She had my chestnut hair, my hazel eyes, my heart-shaped face. But she was different. She wasn't the girl they adored, the one they couldn't stop talking about, the one who would be the talk of the town at the ball. I pressed my hands to the sink, willing myself to breathe, but it felt like I couldn't catch my breath. I was drowning in this life, in the shadow of a girl I was supposed to call my sister. How had we ended up this way? How had it become so clear, so inescapable that Vanessa's dreams were worth their time, while mine were destined to remain nothing more than quiet whispers in the background? I turned away from the mirror, my pulse still racing. Maybe this was it. Maybe I was always going to be the one left out, the one who worked in the shadows while everyone else was in the spotlight, the one who was left behind. But deep inside, something in me snapped. I wasn't going to accept this. I wasn't going to let them decide my worth anymore. They could continue investing in Vanessa's beauty, in her future. But I would invest in something they couldn't take away, something that would prove them all wrong. And that thought, that quiet whisper of defiance, was the only thing that kept me going as I walked out of the bathroom and back into the silence of the house. I didn't know yet what I would do, but I would find a way to make them see me. I would find a way to show them that I was more than just other qualities. And when that day came, I would make sure they couldn't look away. It's the unfairness of it all. My parents weren't just ignoring me. They were actively choosing to place me in a box, telling me what I could and couldn't be, what was and wasn't possible for me. They didn't see me, not for who I was, not for what I was capable of. I could feel my hands shaking as I held my pen, my grip tightening until it hurt. The words on the page blurred as my thoughts spiraled. I had been doing everything I was supposed to. I had made straight A's since I could remember. I had taken every extra class, every volunteer opportunity. I stayed up late every night, poring over textbooks, trying to be the person they would finally see. If not for my beauty, then for my mind. But it never mattered. All of their attention was always on Vanessa. She was the center of every conversation, the star in their eyes. And me? I was just the background, the quiet one, the smart one. The tears burned in my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. Not now. I couldn't be weak, not when I was finally starting to understand something. I wasn't going to wait for them to acknowledge me. I wasn't going to sit around hoping they'd realize that I was worthy of something more. Number I had to take control. I had to create the opportunities for myself because no one else was going to. It was a whisper at first, just a thought, small and quiet, but the more I thought about it, the more it grew. I wasn't going to ask for their approval. I was going to do it without them. And when I did, they would have no choice but to see me. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I made a plan. I pulled out a notebook and started writing down everything I could do to push myself forward. I looked up scholarships, early graduation programs, universities I could apply to. I stayed up until the clock read past midnight, my eyes bloodshot but focused. Each word I wrote down felt like an act of rebellion. It wasn't enough to just exist. I had to prove that I wasn't a wasted investment. The next day, I called my school counselor and set up a meeting. I didn't know exactly how I was going to make it happen, but I knew it was possible. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years: hope. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, my heart already pounding with a mixture of excitement and fear. I wasn't sure what I would say to Mrs. Winters, but I knew that I had to take this step, no matter how small. When I walked into her office, I could already feel the nervous energy buzzing through me. I sat down and smiled, trying to steady my nerves, but she could probably tell how tense I was. "So, Isabella?" Mrs. Winters said kindly, glancing at me from across the desk. "What can I do for you today?" I hesitated for a moment and then I spoke, my voice steady even though my insides were screaming. "I'd like to graduate early," I said, pushing the proposal I'd written across her desk. "I've mapped out my credits. With summer classes and some extra work, I can finish by December. I want to start college as soon as possible." Mrs. Winters looked over my plan, her brow furrowing slightly as she flipped through the pages. "This is ambitious," she said, her voice thoughtful. "But you're sure you want to push yourself this hard? It's a lot of work." "I don't have a choice," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I need to prove to myself that I'm worth more than what they see. I need to take control of my future." Her expression softened, and for a moment, I thought she might tell me it was too much, that I should take the easy road. But instead, she leaned forward, a small smile forming on her lips. "Well, it's certainly doable. Let me help you make this happen." The weight lifted from my shoulders, but a new kind of pressure settled in. This was just the beginning. My parents would never agree to it. I knew they would try to stop me, that they would tell me I was being unreasonable. But I didn't care. I wasn't asking for their approval anymore. I was going to make them see me, not through their eyes, but through mine. As I walked out of her office, my heart was still racing, but it was different now. This time, the adrenaline wasn't born from fear. It was born from purpose. The road ahead was going to be hard. I wasn't deluding myself about that, but I was ready, and if my parents wouldn't give me the life I deserved, I would take it for myself. I had already started, and there was no turning back. It didn't take long for my parents to find out. It never did. The moment I started taking the steps to carve my own future, the walls of our house seemed to close in even tighter, and their eyes turned sharper, more critical. I'd been working on my early graduation plan for weeks, gathering all the necessary paperwork, making sure I was prepared to face the inevitable storm. But nothing could prepare me for the look on my father's face when I finally sat them down to explain what I was doing. "Isabella?" My father's voice was low, controlled, but there was an edge to it that I'd learned to fear. "This is unnecessary. You're pushing yourself too hard. No one expects you to compete with your sister's success." His words made my skin crawl. I could already hear the subtle condemnation in his voice. The unspoken message that Vanessa's success, the success they had planned for her, was the real prize. And I was the problem, the one who didn't fit the mold. I'm not competing with Vanessa, I said, trying to keep my voice steady though my hands were shaking. I'm securing my own future. The silence in the room stretched out, suffocating. My mother, who had been sitting on the couch, her arms crossed tightly across her chest, finally spoke up. "We've already discussed your future," she said, her voice dripping with that practiced, dismissive tone I hated. "There's a nice state school close by. It's practical. You don't need anything fancy. You'll get a degree, and that will be enough. It's more than enough for someone like you." Her words hit me like a slap. Someone like you. That was what she really meant. I wasn't the kind of person who needed ambition, who needed big dreams. I was the practical one, the smart one who wasn't going to waste their money on impossible dreams. I wanted to shout, to scream that I was more than what they saw, more than their expectations for me. But instead, I clenched my jaw and kept my voice calm. "I'm applying to top-tier universities," I said, each word harder than the last. "I've already researched the scholarships. I don't need your money. I'll make it happen." My father's face turned dark, his jaw clenched tightly, as though trying to hold back the anger rising inside him. "You're wasting your time, Isabella. You'll never get in. Those schools cost a fortune, and your mother and I can't afford it. We've told you before. We have to prioritize Vanessa. Her future, her marriage, those things are far more important right now." I felt the blood drain from my face. I had expected this, but it still felt like a gut punch. The weight of their indifference, their cold rejection of my aspirations, was unbearable. "Isn't it enough that I've worked harder than anyone else in this family?" I finally said, my voice shaking despite myself. "I've been the one to sacrifice, the one who's never asked for anything, the one who has done everything right, and yet none of that matters to you, does it?" The silence that followed was deafening. My father looked away, his face hardening even more, and my mother's gaze turned cold. They weren't seeing me. They weren't hearing me. To them, I was just the afterthought again, the girl who would be fine because I wasn't like Vanessa. I wasn't worthy of the same investment. I stood up, the anger building inside me, making my heart pound in my chest. "I don't need your approval anymore. I'll prove to you that I'm worth something, on my own terms." I didn't wait for their response. I turned on my heel and walked out of the room, my mind racing. I had to make them see. I had to prove that I was worthy of everything they had denied me. And if they wouldn't give me the space to breathe, then I would find a way to escape their grip on me. I wasn't going to be the one left behind anymore. I wasn't going to let them decide my worth. I would prove it to myself first. Then maybe they would finally see me. But there was one thing I knew for sure. The road ahead would be even harder than I'd anticipated. They had already made their choices. Now it was time for me to make mine. The weeks that followed were a blur of stress and adrenaline. I was walking a thin line, balancing the grueling workload I had set for myself, the preparations for early graduation, and the cold weight of my parents' rejection. Every day felt like a battle. Every time I came home, I felt the tension in the air, the subtle, unspoken reminder that my dreams were not welcome here. But I was used to it by now. I had learned to carry my own weight long before I had any right to, and I was no stranger to the feeling of being overlooked. In a way, it only made me more determined. The more they pushed me down, the harder I fought to rise. The worst part? The silence. My parents refused to talk to me about it after that initial confrontation. It was as though they were hoping I would just give up, like they thought their indifference would break me, but it only made me push harder. I started going to the library after school, staying up late to write essays for my scholarship applications, learning things outside of the curriculum. Anything to show myself that I could do this, that I was worthy of a future far beyond the narrow one they had mapped out for me. But the pressure was relentless. I didn't sleep much, and my exhaustion grew each day, my body physically weakening from the lack of rest. But it was the emotional toll that was the hardest to carry. I had never felt more alone than in those weeks, sitting in my room surrounded by textbooks and application forms, the weight of my family's apathy pressing down on me like a lead blanket. There was no comfort, no encouragement, just the empty space where I had hoped for support. But still, I worked, I studied, I applied. I poured everything I had into it, determined to make this happen on my own. I wasn't just fighting for my future anymore. I was fighting to be seen, to prove that I mattered. Then one day, I saw it. The letter. The letter that would change everything. It arrived in the middle of the afternoon, a thick envelope with the familiar seal of an Ivy League university. My hands were trembling when I tore it open, my heart pounding in my chest. I pulled out the letter, my eyes skimming over the words. My mind went blank. I had to read it again. Congratulations, Isabella Mercer. We are pleased to inform you that you've been accepted to Harvard University. I sat there, staring at the letter in disbelief. I had done it. I had made it into one of the most prestigious schools in the world, and they hadn't even considered me worthy of their attention. It was a moment I would never forget, when all the pain, the rejection, the years of sacrifice finally paid off. I had done it, not for them, not for anyone else, but for me. I stood up, holding the letter tightly in my hands, feeling the weight of the world lift from my shoulders. The knot in my chest that had been there for years was suddenly gone. In that moment, I realized that I didn't need their approval. I had earned this, on my own. I wanted to run to them, to shove the letter in their faces and make them see, but I knew better than to expect them to understand. They wouldn't see my success for what it was. They would see it as a challenge, a threat. But I didn't care. I had something they could never take away from me, my future. I had known my parents would react badly, but nothing prepared me for the cold dismissal I received when I showed them the acceptance letter. It was a Saturday night. My father was watching the news in the living room, and my mother was fiddling with the dishes in the kitchen. I stood at the edge of the room, clutching the letter in my hand, my heart beating faster than it had in weeks. I could feel their eyes on me before I even spoke. They knew something was different. I could feel the shift in the air, a tension that had been building ever since I'd started this journey. They knew I'd applied, and they probably assumed I would fail. But I hadn't. "Mom, Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I got in." I held the letter up, my hands shaking as I extended it toward them. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. My father put down his newspaper, his brow furrowed, but he didn't reach for the letter. Instead, he stared at it like it was some kind of insult. "Well, it's just a letter," my mother said, her voice flat. "What's the big deal? You're not even sure if you can afford it. You haven't thought this through, Isabella. You're getting ahead of yourself." Her words were like knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. They hadn't even looked at the letter, hadn't even considered the years of work that had gone into getting me to this point. They hadn't seen me, not really. "I've already applied for scholarships," I said, my voice trembling now. "I've researched everything. I can make this work. I'm going to Harvard. I'm going." My father let out a sharp laugh, shaking his head. "This is absurd. We're not wasting money on something like this. We've already told you. Vanessa's future is what matters. She's the one who has the looks, the social skills. She's the one who matters." Each word stung, like salt in an open wound. I had always known where I stood in their eyes, but to hear it so plainly, to have my years of work reduced to nothing more than an afterthought, it felt like I was being suffocated all over again. "I've worked harder than anyone in this family," I said, my voice cracking with emotion. "I've done everything you've asked of me. I've been the practical one, the good daughter. But none of that matters to you, does it? Not until it fits into your plan for Vanessa." "Don't make this about Vanessa," my mother snapped, but I could hear the defensiveness in her voice. "You're being unreasonable. This isn't how things work." I didn't even have words to respond. What was there to say? They weren't going to change. Not now, not ever. But I had already made my decision. I walked away, not looking back, not waiting for their approval. I didn't need it. I had already proven to myself that I was worthy of everything they had never given me. As I walked out the door and into the night, I couldn't help but smile, a sense of peace settling in my chest. My future was no longer in their hands. It was mine. The days after that confrontation were a blur of final preparations. My parents' disapproval was a constant hum in the background, but it didn't matter anymore. Their words, their rejection, no longer had the power to dictate my worth. I had already stepped into my future, one they couldn't control, no matter how much they tried to push me back into the box they had built for me. I threw myself into my final preparations with a fierce determination. I wasn't going to let their failure to see my potential hold me back. I wasn't going to allow their limited view of the world to shape the course of my life. Every application I sent out, every test I took, every letter of recommendation I gathered felt like a small act of defiance. It was a way of telling them that they had been wrong about me. But there was still something else lingering in my mind, something I couldn't quite shake off. Vanessa. In all of this, she was the one I couldn't quite figure out. She was the one who had it all: the beauty, the approval, the attention. But what did she really have beyond what they had forced her to be? She had never asked for any of it. She was just as trapped in their expectations as I had been, even if her cage was gilded in gold. I had seen the look on her face when she came home from shopping for her debutante dress, that fleeting moment of vulnerability when she had confessed her own doubts, her own frustrations with the life they had planned for her. I had seen it, and for the first time, I had realized that we weren't so different. She was just as much a product of their making as I was. And then, one night, just before I left for Harvard, I had a conversation with her, one I wasn't expecting. We were sitting on the floor of my room, packing up the last of my things, when Vanessa suddenly spoke. "I always thought you had it easier," she said, her voice soft, almost apologetic. "I thought that being smart was better than being pretty, that you didn't have the pressure I did. But now I see. You've had it harder than I ever realized." I paused, looking at her, stunned by the words I never expected to hear. It wasn't what I had been expecting from her. But there it was, an admission, an understanding that I had never thought possible. "I thought you had it easy," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "But I see now that we've both been trapped. Trapped by their expectations, by their plans for us." She nodded slowly, her eyes wide with unspoken thoughts. "I want something more, Isabella," she admitted, her voice breaking just slightly. "I don't want to just be a pretty face, but I don't know how to break free. I don't know how to stop being what they made me into." Her words were a punch to the gut. Vanessa, the girl who had always seemed to have it all, the one who was always the center of attention, was just as lost as I had been. She was just as much a victim of our parents' manipulation. For the first time in years, we truly saw each other. And in that moment, I knew that I wasn't just fighting for my own future anymore. I was fighting for hers, too. "I'll help you," I said, my voice steady despite the emotions running through me. "We'll figure this out. We don't have to be what they want us to be. We can find our own way." For the first time, I saw a flicker of hope in Vanessa's eyes. It was a small thing, but it was there. And for me, that was enough. The day I left for Harvard was a whirlwind of emotions. My parents said nothing as I packed up my car, barely acknowledging me as I prepared to leave. The only ones who spoke were Vanessa and Aunt Catherine. Vanessa helped me with the last of my bags, her hands trembling as she carried a few boxes out to the car. "Promise me you'll come back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I will," I promised, even though I knew deep down that it might be a while before I did. My mother called from the doorway, her voice cold and distant. "Remember, Isabella, this is all your choice. Don't expect us to bail you out if things go wrong." I nodded, not bothering to respond. It wasn't about their approval anymore. I didn't need their permission to live my life. As I drove away from the house, the place that had held so many memories, both painful and defining, I felt a sense of freedom wash over me. I was finally doing it. I was taking control of my future. I was no longer bound by their limitations. It wasn't until I reached Aunt Catherine's apartment later that evening that I realized just how much had changed. I was sitting in her kitchen sipping tea when she handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "I've been saving for you," she said softly, "for when you were ready to leave. You're going to need it." I opened the envelope and stared at the check inside. Enough money to cover my first semester at Harvard. Enough to keep me going, to help me get started. "You didn't have to do this," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But thank you." Aunt Catherine smiled, her eyes full of understanding. It's not just about money, Isabella. It's about giving you the chance to choose your own future. Don't let anyone take that away from you. I sat there for a long time, staring at the check, feeling something shift deep within me. It wasn't just the money, it was the recognition, the belief that I was worthy of this chance. It was the final validation I needed to step fully into the life I had always dreamed of. And that night, as I lay in bed, ready to leave for Harvard the next morning, I thought about everything that had brought me to this moment. The struggle, the rejection, the pain, it had all been part of the journey. It had all led me to this moment of freedom. I wasn't just leaving my family behind. I was leaving everything that had ever held me back, and I was walking into a future that was mine to create. I had finally done it. I had proved them wrong, and no matter what came next, I knew one thing for sure. I was worthy, and that would be enough.